Okay, we're going to talk about the quadratic formula. I'm going to do this in about hopefully 10 minutes or so. Basically, the quadratic formula is another way to solve quadratics. Okay, so right now you know how to solve quadratics in two methods. Okay, you can solve using graphing. You can also solve using factoring. That's what we've been working on the last couple days, is solving quadratics using factoring. So we're going to learn a third way to solve quadratics using the formula. Now, the formula can solve any quadratic. Now, I know that some of these are the reason we use the formula. Factoring is relatively easy if you get really good at factoring. Graphing, of course, is the easiest of all. But using the quadratic formula will allow you to solve any of them, including the ones that have imaginary solutions, which we're not going to talk about in 9th grade. But if it's not a perfect number, if it's a rational number with a radical, you'll be able to solve any quadratic at all using the quadratic formula. Like I've told some people before, when I was in high school, I used the quadratic formula for everything. Basically, the quadratic formula says that x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all of that divided by 2a. So that's the formula itself. It's kind of long. If you Google quadratic formula, you'll find some little catchy songs for quadratic formula, this and that. The quadratic formula will be present on your star chart, so memorizing the quadratic formula isn't as a necessity as actually learning how to use it. Okay? Now, these a, b, and c values come from the standard quadratic form, which is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. In order to solve for the quadratic formula, you must be equal to 0. If you're not equal to 0, you cannot do this. Okay, so you got to be equal to 0. Then once you're equal to 0, now you can actually look at your a term, which will go in here for these a values. Then you can look at your b term, which will go in here for these b values. And then you can look at your c term, which would go in here for that c value. Okay? Alright, so let's put this to practice for a minute then.
Students, we need to let...
Okay, so again, here's the formula that you're going to have to memorize. I'm sorry, you don't really have to memorize, but this is what we're going to be using, this quadratic formula. Okay, it's a deviation of this form down here. Okay, it's a deviation from this form. That's where it comes from. Alright, so let's go ahead and put this into practice. Let's see how we're going to use this. So let's say we're given the example x squared plus 11x plus 24 equals 0. Okay, so what we're going to do is, we're already set equal to 0, so let's identify our a value. Our a value is the number that's, again, in front of, it's ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So the a value is the one that's in front of the x squared. Well, there's nothing there, so a must equal 1. Our b value is the one in front of the x, so our b value here is 11. And our c value is the constant term, or the naked number, so that c value is 24. So now I need to go ahead and plug it into the formula. And again, that formula, and the best way to memorize this is write it every time. The formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. So now let's just start plugging it in. Negative comes Okay, so what is the b value? The b is 11. So that negative is already there. The negative just came down, and then I put the 11 there for b. Plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is a 11 squared, okay, minus 4 times the a value is 1 times the c value, which is 24, okay, over 2 times the a value, which is 1. And now all I have to do is simply work and simplify. So I have a negative 11 plus or minus the square root of 11 squared is 121. Minus, okay, 4 times 1 is 4, and then 4 times 24 is 96. So 121 minus 96 over 2. Keep simplifying. Negative 11 plus or minus the square root of 121 minus 96 is 25 over 2. Continue to simplify. I have negative 11 plus or minus square root of 25 is 5 over 2. Now, I'm going to move over here just so we can see a little bit more. The next step of this is to break this into two problems. So now I have x equals negative 11 plus 5 divided by 2, and, because remember, a lot of times our quadratics have more than one solution. We have 1, 2, or none. Okay, so my other option would be x equals negative 11 minus 5 over 2. That's where this plus or minus part right here comes in. We break it up into two formulas, or two simple equations. So negative 11 plus 5 is negative 6. So x equals negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. Negative 11 minus 5 is negative 16. Negative 16 divided by 2 is negative 8. So my solutions would be negative 3 and negative 8. Now that's the longest way to do a quadratic using the quadratic equation. I'm going to show you another method here in just a second that might be a little bit shorter. I actually learned in Brazil. Go ahead and make sure you have this and understand this. All I'm really doing is I know this formula right here looks very intimidating, but all I really got to do is plug it in and simplify. Plug it in and simplify. Plug it in and simplify until I get down to two solutions, which I have right down here. Okay, so there's not a whole lot more to the quadratic formula other than what I've showed you, but I want to do two more examples because it's going to have a little different look. So take a look at these two examples real quick. So I want to show you what I learned how to do in Brazil, and I teach some of the students now, and other teachers teach it now as well. But one of the things they do is that when you're dealing with your x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a, we look at the discriminant first. Okay? The discriminant, D-I-S-C-R-I-M-I-N-A-N-T, discriminant, okay, is equal to b squared minus 4ac. Okay? So essentially the discriminant is right here. This is the discriminant. Okay? It's the stuff underneath the radical sign. Well, if you memorize what I'm about to tell you, it's going to make your life easier. Okay? Okay, so if you memorize what I'm about to tell you, this discriminant, understanding the things about the discriminant is going to make your life so much easier. Okay? So I'm only going to tell you a few things just to make it easier. If b squared, the discriminant, minus 4ac equals a positive number, okay, you will have a real root. I'm just going to tell you to keep going. if b squared minus 4ac equals a negative number, in Algebra 1, you can stop. Because the answer is going to be no real roots. So then you'd box that as your answer. So if you do the discriminant and the discriminant is positive, okay, if the discriminant is positive, you keep going and find the answer. If the discriminant is negative, you stop because you have no real roots. Okay? So let's look at this example here. We have negative 2 x squared minus 4x plus 3 equals 0. So we're already set up for 0, so that's a good thing. Okay, so now I just got to identify a. So a is negative 2. Remember, that's your first term. B is negative 4. And C is 3. Go ahead and plug it into this equation over here. And I end up with negative 4. I have two negatives because there's a negative here, part of the equation, and there's a negative here, part of that number, b. So negative 4 plus or minus, and this is x equals, negative 4 plus or minus the square root of negative 4 squared minus 4 times negative 2, that's my a, times my c value, which is 3, over 2 times negative 2. Now, I just told you one of the things that we do first is look at the discriminant. Normally, I wouldn't even go into doing all of this before I went to the discriminant. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to work out the discriminant. I'm going to work out this part first right here. So I'm going to find out what the discriminant equals. Now, in Brazil, they call the discriminant delta. And so what they do is they just say delta equals negative 4 squared minus 4 times negative 2 times 3. So then I'm going to work it out. Negative 4 is squared is 16. Negative 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. Negative 8 times, it's positive 8. Positive 8 times 3 is 24. So 16 plus 24 is 30. So it's positive. So I'm going to keep going. Okay? I put 30 and I meant 40. Sorry. So my discriminant is 40. Now, I'm going to go ahead and erase this over here so we have more room to work with. Okay, now, I have a positive discriminant, so I know I'm going to have a root, so I'm going to go ahead and keep working. Okay, so as I keep working, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rewrite this again. I'm going to have x equals negative 4 becomes 4, positive 4, right? Plus or minus the square root of, I've already done all this work, so I don't need this now. I'm just going to put this here. So the square root of 40 over 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. So then I'm going to do x equals 4 plus or minus, I got to use my calculator now to find out what the square root of 40 is. So I do the square root of 40 equals approximately 6.3. So I'm just going to put 4 plus or minus 6.3 divided by negative 4. So now I break it up. Remember, I've got to break it up because of these two, that plus or minus sign. So now I'm going to have x equals 4 plus 6.3 over negative 4 and x equals 4 minus 6.3 over negative 4. So 4 plus 6.3 is 10.3 over negative 4, or x equals negative 2.6. And then over here I have 4 minus 6.3, which is negative 2.3. So x equals negative 2.3 over negative 4, or x equals, I'm running out of room, negative 2.3 divided by negative 4 equals 0.6 or 0.575. Okay, so there's my two solutions right there. Okay, a lot of times people like to do the discriminant, this part right here, first, because then they can just plug that 40 in. They don't have to keep rewriting this whole thing. It makes it easier on the hand a little bit to write it easier. It's a lot of work. It's still a lot of work, but it also helps you. Okay, let's look at one more example so I can keep this under 20 minutes. One more example. It's a little bit different, so make sure you don't turn it off yet. Here's our last example. Okay, we're going to do 6x squared minus 3x equals negative 7. All right, what's the problem with this one? Well, we're not equal to 0, so the first step we have to do is get this set equal to 0, because it's got to be equal to 0. So I'm going to add 7 to both sides. So that's going to cancel, and then I end up with 6x squared minus 3x plus 7, because remember, we don't have any like terms here, so that 7 just got to be tacked on to the end, equals 0. Okay? Now let's identify our A term. It's 6. Our B term is negative 3. Make sure you keep that sign in the front. And our C term is 7. Now before I write the whole giant quadratic formula, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just put the discriminant. So the discriminant equals b squared minus 4ac, okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and work it out. So b is negative 3 squared minus 4 times a is 6 times c, which is 7. So the discriminant is negative 3 squared is 9, okay, minus 4 times 6 is 24. 24 times 7 is 168, so I have minus 168. So I have 9 minus 168, so my discriminant is equal to negative 159. It's a negative discriminant, so now I can stop working. Okay, I'm going to have my answer without doing any more, because this is negative. I have no real roots. When you get to Algebra 2, we would keep working because we'd figure out what the roots would actually be imaginary, because we actually have imaginary numbers. So that's it. In Algebra 1, you're done. Okay? Negative discriminant, no real roots, call it a day. All right, hopefully this is enough to get you through. Again, please make sure that you watch this video, take notes, have notes ready for class tomorrow, and we'll get to work tomorrow when you come in. Now, please also remember this. One other thing I want to tell you before I forget. If you're ever missing a term, okay, so just kind of a side note here. If you're ever missing a term, use it for 0. So like if I ever have 4x squared minus 16, okay, equals 0, I'm set up. My A term is equal to 4. My B term is equal to 0 now. And my C term is equal to negative 16. Okay? Or if this was 4x squared minus 16x, then I would have A squared is still 4. Now my B term is negative 16, and my C term would then be 0. So that was just a quick side note, so that way you know if you're ever missing a term, that A, B, or C can be 0. Okay, not A, because then it'd be linear, but B and C can be 0. All right, good luck. See you guys tomorrow. Have a good night.